Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Lakewood City Council study session in the city of Lakewood, Colorado on October 7th, 2019 at 7 p.m. in council chambers. The clerk, please call the roll.
Ball.
Here.
Roybal.
Here.
Gutwein. Skilling. LeBure.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Vincent. Here. Beta. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody who is with us this evening, or if you're tuning in later, we should have a nice informative evening of two important topics. So we'll kick this right off with a presentation by our police chief, Chief McCaskey. Come on down.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Edgewater Chief of Police, John Mackey, who has a letter to read, a commendation letter for the Lakewood Police Department. And John's one of our former longtime police agents, so we're welcome, glad to have him here. So, Chief Mackey.
Great. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I think I met the mayor when he was about 13. And I won't say in what context. Yeah. So, I've been out here a long time, but the accent hasn't gone. If I say park or car, it'll stick with you. But anyway, I did serve this city for 20 years and had a great time in this city, so I feel like I'm amongst friends. But it's been 18 years since I left, and so now I'm really here to say thank you. I'm here to say thank you for the support that the Lakewood City Council gives our Lakewood Police Department, and that support goes on throughout our county. And sometimes, as City Council folks, you don't realize sometimes these long relationships we had. I was out at the county commissioners just a couple of weeks ago to thank them because the sheriff's department also assisted us. And I'll tell you, when I got to talk to the county commissioners, I said one of our first volunteers here in the city of Lakewood was a lady by the name of Dee Truesdale. And Dee was a 20-year volunteer for the city of Lakewood. But for all of our Lakewood police agents, she was much more than that. Because her husband, Bill Truesdale, got shot and killed in a bank robbery at the Citywide Bank in the early 80s. And Dee went to all those court hearings, et cetera, but she got to know all of us as people and police agents. And so she just kept coming. And it wasn't really to start out as a volunteer, but that's what had happened. That was our first volunteer. I forgot that story until I just got in front of the county commissioners the other day, and I thought, we have strong partnerships, right? And I will say we have strong partnerships throughout this. That's partner, P-A-R-T. I'm looking at some of the smiles. So, but obviously, Chief McCaskey and I have worked together a long, long time. So even though I'm up the street, I will tell you, I was just introduced to Michelle, and when I started at Lakewood, Margie Greer was the Edgewater city clerk, and I thought it was so funny that I was. Thank you. I'm glad I got to meet you, Michelle. But Margie had been at Edgewater when she started, and I was at Lakewood, obviously. And I heard she just retired. So these have been long time career, long time relationships. And I'm not going to spend the time to read the letter. It's kind of lengthy, but I will tell you, our counterpart, our sheriff, Jeff Schrader, just happened to be presenting to the Edgewater City Council. And I need to say that. I'm here on behalf of the Edgewater City Council. I'm here on behalf of Laura Keegan and the Edgewater City Council to say thank you. That's really what I'm here for. That's all I'm really here for, is to say thank you. But what you need to realize is, when something happens in another city, it can be traumatic. And we had an Edgewater City Council here, and the sheriff came up, and I will tell you, he got a standing ovation for helping our city. So, folks, if you could help me, thank our Lakewood City Council. It was 17-hour standoff. We're a small agency of under 20 people. Your commander, your chief, your command staff, you got top people here. And I need to say this. Kathy and I started about the same time in the city. She still looks the same. I look like I should have retired 10 years ago. I just let you know, these relationships, we benefit so much, the collaborative effort, but ultimately your support to our police department is essential. I just want to say thank you. That's all. Have a good night.
Thanks, Chief Mackey. And again, good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. We have a short presentation I'm going to start with, but I'd like to introduce our guest here today. I have my command staff with me, Division Chief Ed Lowers, our Support Services Division Chief. Division Chief Anita Kester is our Investigation Division Chief, and Steve Rickles is our Patrol Division Chief. And then next to Steve is Carrie Nordland, one of our crime analysts, who's put together a lot of this information today for us. So about 3 weeks ago, the city manager asked me to talk about crime in Lakewood. We put together some statistics and some different charts and some maps, and hopefully we can have a good conversation tonight, and we're open for a lot of questions after the presentation, and we're all going to be answering those questions for you. But the first thing I thought I would start with is our calls for service, and I have the next chart will show this a little bit better, but we started April of 18 with this because that's when we switched to JEFCOM, the new Regional 911 Communication Center, and we switched to a different computer-aided dispatch system. We went to TriTech when we made that cutover, so it records calls for service a little differently than our old Intergraph CAD system. So that's why we wanted to start with 2018 April when we made that switch. And you'll see the chart there that we've been fairly consistent with our citizen-generated calls for service as well as our officer-generated calls for service. This next slide kind of explains it, shows it a little better, the numbers. So at the very bottom column, you'll see the total calls for service. And again, those are citizen-generated and officer-generated. So basically, we're between 9,000 and 11,000 calls for service a month for the Lakewood Police Department. So we're for our size of a city, that's probably fairly average. We're almost over 155,000 people. So you can see that's remained relatively consistent since April through August. Now, again, this is just for January 1st of this year through August 31st of this year. We weren't able to pull the data for September. But if you look, you see our top 10 citizen-generated calls for service, then our top 10 officer-generated calls for service. So you see theft is probably our number one citizen-generated. And if you just go down that list, welfare check, disturbance, unwanted party, and the unwanted party could be a number of different things. It could be somebody at a business, at a bar. It could be a homeless person that someone calls on. So there's a lot of different things with that. Suspicious vehicle, parking complaints, accidents. So you can see there's a variety of different calls there, but the majority of those tend to be non-criminal events. They could turn into crime reports later, but generally, like I say, theft is our number one call for service this year so far. And then if you look to the top 10 officer-generated traffic stops, we made almost 10,000 traffic stops. We also, if you think about that, we have 2 traffic teams that their sole focus is traffic enforcement. But ordinance violation could be a number of different things. Extra patrol requests, we do those often when people have something going on or they want us to have more visibility, those types of things. So that's just sort of an example of from this year where we're at. Now this, and I'll have another slide as well with this, but this kind of just shows you some of the metro-wide trends. We've added Denver, Aurora, Wheat Ridge, and Lakewood in there, and the populations are in there, so you see we're just over 156,000. The numbers of crimes are different just because the population, but if you see, you kind of look at the trend there, and the trend, we're all fairly trending the same way throughout the metropolitan area through these cities. you see the years there, then you see the different crimes. Homicide, we tend to have fewer of those. Motor vehicle thefts are prevalent throughout the metro area. We know that. And Division Chief Kester will talk about some of the things we've done to combat that. But you can see, for a Lakewood perspective, we are basically trending as other metropolitan cities are, as our neighbors in Denver and Aurora. This is another chart on metro-wide trends. You can see Denver's the blue line, Aurora's the red, we are the purple line there, and Wheat Ridge is the green line. So once again, you look, the numbers are going to be different because population's different, but you see, the homicide, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, motor vehicle theft, and sexual assault. So motor vehicle theft is, again, one of the most prevalent crimes in the metro area that we're seeing. But again, I know there's been comments made, and the next slide will talk about some percentages. But we are a large city in a major metropolitan area, and we're going to experience crime. And you can see we're really no different than a lot of our other cities. We broke down this through probably the top crimes that we were looking at: homicide, sex assault, robbery, aggravated assault, and then the property crimes. And these are considered Group A crimes by NIBRS, and NIBRS, the National Incident-Based Reporting System. That's basically the old FBI statistics that we now submit our crimes to. So if you look at those statistics there, I think the first thing that jumps out is we've had 9 homicides this year. That's a lot. Division Chief Kester is going to talk a little bit about those. And I know I'll tell you, the Belmar homicide, where we had two people stabbed to death, was pretty shocking for all of us. And that was just a random crime. There was no relationship between the suspect that we arrested and the 2 people that were killed in the park. If I knew how to prevent that, I would, but that was just a random crime. There was no connection, and that case will be prosecuted. But I know that had a lot of people concerned. It had us concerned because it was so random. Most of our homicides, there tends to be a relationship between our victims and our suspects, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's a drug deal, whether it's a disturbance. There tends to almost always be a relationship. So that's why Belmar was so concerning for us. But generally, we have 4 or 5 homicides a year, which for a city our size is not bad. 1 homicide's too many, but our homicides don't tend to normally be that high. The 2019 statistics you see there, that's only through August 31st. So you have to kind of extrapolate out a little bit. Our sex assaults we're probably trending a little bit down. Robberies probably going to be right on par with 2018. We had a high 2017 year for robberies, but if you look at those percentages, you can see we've had some increases. We've also had some decreases. I've heard 300%. I actually was here one night at public comment, and I heard 300% increase in crime. Not sure where that came from. It's not accurate, not factual, based on, there's no basis of fact for that. I will tell you, do we have some increases in crime? Yes, 300%. I've heard that number bannered about. Not true, not accurate. So hopefully this dispels some of that. If you look, you see our motor vehicle thefts were up last year, but this year, so far we're trending down, and that's one of our biggest crimes. Just real briefly, I wanted to go over some of our arrest statistics, and you see from 2016, we're arresting probably 12 to 13,000 people a year with juveniles included in that. So our arrests have remained relatively stable as well. That number hasn't increased dramatically or decreased dramatically, and we're probably right on par for roughly 10 to 11,000 arrests again this year. I'm going to have a couple maps for you. This is a heat map, and if there's questions, we can have our crime analyst respond to this. But this first map is our persons crime and where they're generally concentrated in the city of Lakewood. I'm sorry, that's property crimes. I had the wrong page there. But so you'll see our property crimes, and you'll see this, it's pretty consistent. West Colfax drives our crime rate, particularly between Sheridan and Wadsworth. And it always has. In my career, West Colfax has always been a driver of our crime rate. I would like to tell you that I have some great ideas about how to change that. I would tell you that you cannot arrest your way out of a situation like West Colfax. That needs economic revival. It needs good policy decisions by our lawmakers, by our city council. You know, it is a dilapidated area, and unfortunately, it causes us a lot of crime issues. I don't mean to be disparaging about that, but it does create a lot of work for us. And in my 33 years here, it always has. But you'll see that's West Colfax on our property crimes. There's our persons crimes. And again, you'll see it's West Colfax between Wadsworth and Sheridan that really drives that. There's a hot spot out on Union, that's St. Anthony's Hospital, and there's not a lot of crime there, but there's a lot of crime reported there. So if somebody's transported from anywhere in the metro area, from out of county, we get a lot of reports at St. Anthony's. That's why that's a hot spot there for you. But again, our persons and our property crimes are directed on, again, you see the concentration on West Colfax. And then this is overall, this is persons and property crimes again, where you see those. You'll see Belmar has a pretty significant footprint there, but there's a lot of apartments. We get a lot of property crimes there, car break-ins, car thefts, things like that. And you'll also see a couple of our big retail box stores are on there. You can see them on the map. You can see a couple of our hotels on there. So when you talk crime in Lakewood, this is where we concentrate a lot of our efforts. And we've done some things too recently. I mean, you all have passed that lodging license, which I think is going to be really helpful for us to help combat crime on West Colfax. That's just one tool, though, that we have. And I'm going to invite Division Chief Rickles from our patrol division to talk about some of our enforcement activities, some of the things that we're doing to combat crime. We're aware of a lot of where it's occurring, and we're out there doing a lot of different operations. And so Chief Rickles is going to come speak about that.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Again, my name is Steve Rickles. I'm in charge of the Patrol Division. So I'd like to discuss two items. First are the proactive operations both the Patrol and Investigations Division have participated in over the past 3 years that address criminal activity in Lakewood. And secondly, the daily responsibilities of patrol agents. So regarding the proactive operations, they involve participation from our federal, state partners to include U.S. Marshals, DEA, ATF, Parole, and CSP. All of the operations I'm about to discuss are directed towards areas of the city that have consistently seen higher rates of criminal activity based on statistics provided by our crime analysts. There are three types of proactive operations the police department regularly participates in to address crime. One of which you may have heard are the Colfax motel operations. These operations normally occur 3 to 4 times a year and involve patrol agents, detectives, and agents from various state and federal agencies. These operations are large. They include 30 to 40 law enforcement officers. They address criminal activity both in and around the motels along Colfax Avenue. The second types of operations that the police department participates in are our special enforcement team hotspot operations. If you don't know, our special enforcement team consists of 1 sergeant and 6 agents. These monthly operations target rising criminal activity anywhere in the city. And I'll give you an example. In March of this year, the SET team, based on crime analyst data, conducted an operation in the area of West 1st Avenue to 5th Avenue, Harlan to Sheridan, resulting in the arrest of 4 fugitives. So our operations aren't necessarily always on Colfax Avenue, but for the most part, they are. The last type of operation I want to discuss is Operation Triple Beam. Triple Beam operations have been conducted 3 to 4 times a year and involve the SET team and the U.S. Marshals. Operation Triple Beam is directed towards 3 things. The first, wanted felons located anywhere within the city of Lakewood, 2, unregistered sex offenders, and lastly, criminal activity along the Colfax corridor. The 3 types of operations I just discussed have resulted in some of the following: the arrest of over 150 wanted subjects with lengthy criminal histories, the recovery of 12 firearms, some of which were stolen, over 130 summons issued, and the seizure of approximately 10 pounds of various types of narcotics. Most of these operations, as I stated earlier, are directed in and around the motels along Colfax Avenue, though we have also addressed motels in the area of 285 and Wadsworth Boulevard. All of our operations have been extremely successful, as you've seen, and can be done on a weekly basis. Now I wanted to touch on some of the daily patrol responsibilities as a division chief that I expect of the patrol agents. I'd like to talk about the daily patrol responsibilities of our agents and what I expect of them as a division chief. In addition to the operations mentioned, agents are responsible for a specific motel, school, and park in their assigned sector. It is expected of them that they will perform extra patrols at their assigned parks, schools, and motels, all depending on deployment. Recent criminal activity and extra patrol requests are discussed daily in every roll call briefing. Our crime analysts on a weekly basis update our special enforcement team repeat offender program and our sector logs. This is done so agents are updated on information on the top 10 repeat offenders in Lakewood. As the chief mentioned, the lodging license. Although passed, it's still too early for us to determine what kind of effect it's going to have on curbing criminal activity. So in closing, I'd just like to reassure you that our patrol agents, they take ownership of the areas they are assigned within the city. They work closely with our investigations division, state and federal partners, and crime analysts to address the criminal activity and growing crime trends in the city of Lakewood. So thank you for your time. With that, I'd like to introduce Division Chief Anita Kester.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm Division Chief Anita Kester, and I lead the Investigations Division. I will provide an update, like the Chief said, regarding the homicides for 2019, along with some of the things that the division is doing to address crime. Of the 9 homicides we've had this year, 2 are related to domestic violence, 5 are related to drugs and money, and 2 in the Belmar Park truly are the anomaly and were random acts of violence by one individual. The thing that is important for our community to hear is there is not an outstanding public safety issue. We have made arrests on 7 of the 9 homicides, with the investigation continuing on the 2 unsolved cases. As Chief McCaskey discussed earlier, Lakewood has seen similar crime trends in the metro area. Unfortunately, criminals and their activities do not remain in one jurisdiction. Some of the ways we are combating this are by working with the federal, state, and local agencies. Chief Rickles talked about the operations on Colfax and the hotspot operations. I'm going to provide a little bit of information on the update of the specific task forces that investigations has agents assigned to or detectives assigned to help partner in combat crime. Project Safe Neighborhood is a task force associated with the ATF and assists in gun-related crimes. And anytime we recover stolen guns on stolen vehicles or anything else, we contact ATF and they run through the databases. RAVEN, which is considered the Regional Anti-Violence Enforcement Network, is a task force associated with Homeland Security and ATF to combat organized gang activity and the associated violent crimes. Operation Safe Streets is a task force associated with the FBI and is instrumental in investigating bank robberies, active shooters, and kidnappings. CMAT is a task force specifically designed to address the auto thefts. This task force addresses the organized groups, and not just individuals, but the organized groups responsible for the majority of the auto thefts in the metro area. CMAT and the local agencies are responsible for recovering over 90% of the stolen vehicles in the metro area, which is compared to the national average of 55%. So we're doing extremely well in that category. West Metro Drug Task Force focuses on the large-scale drug operations and identifying the suppliers of street-level drugs. And we have agents and detectives assigned to each one of those task force, which really help us partner and address the crimes not only see the trends throughout the city, but throughout the metro area, and we can address them as a whole. We also have 7 SROs in 17 schools and detectives who specialize in different areas, such as the burglary, robbery, person-related crimes, theft, family crimes, as well as economic crimes and crimes against children. So we have detectives who have the specialties in each of those areas, again, to be able to provide the best service to our victims and our community. The upcoming Family Justice Center in Jefferson County, named as Porchlight, which this council has graciously supported and we are so excited, is anticipated to have a significant impact on family-related crimes. Areas with a Family Justice Center have seen a 50% decrease in domestic violence homicides, an increase in victim participation in the criminal justice process, and an increase in the ability to provide necessary services to the victims and families with hopes of ending the cycle of familial abuse. And we're hoping to have, that should be opened the first quarter of next year. The reality is we have crime in Lakewood. However, we really are providing the resources to not only respond to the crimes, but we are also working diligently on impacting the crime before it occurs. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I know that's sort of a brief presentation, we'll be glad to answer any questions, or I can bring up any slides again that you'd like to see on this as well. As Chief Kester said, we do have crime in Lakewood. We're a major metropolitan city. We're the 5th largest city in the state of Colorado, and we border Denver. So we are a major metropolitan city. So you are going to have crime. I feel good that the police response to crime in Lakewood is very effective. And that's what, education, prevention, those types of things, that's what we're working on. So with that, I'll be glad to go back to any slides you want to look at, or we can start answering questions, and I can have my staff come up, and however you want to do that, Mayor.
Great. So, sir, sorry, we'll have some public comment here in a little bit, okay? Okay. So thank you for that presentation, and I know it's always a challenge, and you talked about not being able to arrest your way out of it, and certainly I think you know that this council as a whole, we may not agree on everything, but when it comes to public safety, I think we're pretty united, and especially in willing to ensure that you have what you need as far as strength or the different tools. What I'm curious, and we may not know that tonight, but I'd like to say, as we go forward, if there's other tools, if there's other ordinances that you see that could be effective, I think it's important for us to know what those could be. And we've talked about the motel, and then looking at some other property type ordinances. So I think that's an incredibly important part. I also think neighborhood watch. We were all at a meeting, or some of us were at a meeting, and there were some concerns about, how do we get that going again, and what does that look like in the city of Lakewood? As well as what's it look like in the advent of next door, when you might see one crime and by the end of the day it's turned in from a shoplifting into maybe, a homicide via the old game of telephone, right? That misinformation. What does that do to the perception in the community? And I think those are just a couple things. I don't know if there's really a question there, but I think it's important to know that we support you, and we certainly would support any other types of programs or policies you think that would be effective.
Thanks, Mayor. One thing I want to mention about next door, though, and this and I'll give an example. Councilor Beda had a question. There were reports of drive-by shootings in Lakewood Estates from next door. Well, we found where they're being talked about on next door, but people aren't calling us. And we found we did actually have 2 over the past, I believe, 4 months. And the crime analyst did a lot of research. And so we do see a lot of that on Nextdoor, where people will post things, but then they don't call us. We also see on Nextdoor as well where someone will say their car got broken into or their car got stolen. There's a lot of that. And we've tried to educate people, but a lot of times when we have these car break-ins, they're unlocked. Purses, wallets are sitting on the front seat. and they're, they're just it's a target-rich environment, and we try and educate people about that. Don't leave your wallet in your car. Don't leave your gun in your car. Don't leave your purse in your car. Take your car keys. And unfortunately, we see a lot of that. So, I think Nextdoor is a valuable tool. I don't know if it promotes accuracy as much as it could. So.
And I guess, when you hear about these things, or you hear about a drive-by, or you hear, things going on in these neighborhoods, it gets a lot of people angry, and you want to be able to say it's not going to tolerate that here. And how do we get that message out to folks who are committing the crime and saying, you know what, this isn't where you're going to come commit your crimes, because you'll get caught or there'll be severe penalties, and it's probably the hardest thing you deal with.
Yeah, that is a good question, and actually, again, with Councilor Bita, we've had conversations about it. How do we get that word out? And we try through our website, through our public information officer, and it's difficult. I wish I had a better answer for that.
Criminals don't pay attention to lines on maps, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Exactly it. Okay, thank you. Well, we'll go over here to Mr. Bita.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you, Chief McCaskey, for your report. I think it's very helpful, and hopefully we've got a good audience at home that's watching some of this, so that'll give them some things to think about and so forth. Kind of to follow up on this, these drive-by shootings, it seems like it's been, maybe it's just a rash of them, but it seems like there's been quite a few lately, not only in Lakewood Estates, but in other parts of the city. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to maybe educate the public. I noticed one of the conversations we had was that they're not reporting them. They just, they hear them. They know there's shots in the neighborhood and so forth and so on, and they don't bother to report them. And so they don't really show up in your statistics. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. I know of 3 that we've had recently, the 2 in Lakewood Estates and 1 in Meadowlark. And I could ask my crime analyst, but I'm not aware of that this is an epidemic of sort. It may seem like that, but I'm aware of 3. One's too many, but I don't think this this is occurring all the time. And I'm not going to blame Denver for everything, but a lot of we're on the border of Denver, and that's that. I mean, and I'm not blaming Denver, but we do in that southeast area of the city. Sheridan, really, there's no boundary. There's no border.
And just so folks are clear, I'll just make it clear that what we're talking about is where they drive by in the neighborhood and perhaps randomly pick a house and shoot into the walls, and it actually penetrates the walls, and the bullet ends up in the interior of the home. And a couple times people have been were just missed, residents inside the home. And so that's what we're concerned about, and we're just wondering if there's something else going on out there that we're not getting, because these things don't really make any sense. And
You can use that mic if you want. Yeah, I don't have those 3 particular cases. I don't have any information as to. I don't believe they're related, but.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's anything that we can do as counselors to help educate the people, maybe to let them know these things need to be reported, even though we realize there may not be a whole lot you can do about it at any particular case, but at least we know what's going on. Perhaps we can discern a pattern or something like that. Certainly, it helps to be able to retrieve the forensics.
Yes.
If they're available.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for your report and for enlightening us. Sure appreciate it.
Thank you. An excellent presentation, chiefs, plural. I had a question on one of the very first slides that you had up there. You were talking about the number, no, it's further into the presentation than that. You had pedestrian stop. I'd love to know what a pedestrian stop is.
That can be a lot of different things. It can be somebody jaywalking. It can be, you know, we get a report of a suspicious person and we stop them in a neighborhood, okay. Or you know, there can be a lot of different things. So
okay,
it's just a police pedestrian contact.
Okay, have we ticketed or have we talked with bicyclists or scooters? You know, the mopeds that are now are we finding that that's an issue, trying to keep them in the bicycle lanes and off the sidewalks, etc.?
I haven't heard anything about that.
Just Charlie?
Chief Rickles, are you aware of any? Okay. No, I'm not aware of any issues with the bicyclists, and Chief Rickles is not aware of any accidents that we've had either.
That's great. No, I've got two more questions. When I first came on council, one of the real concerns at that particular point in time, and it was prior to, I think, gang task force, say that fast 3 times, that was being implemented. In this report, I didn't hear anything that you talked about that sounded like we have an increase or a concern about additional gang activity in the city, and yet we're getting more and more city-like crime. Tell me what's going on there.
We didn't. Well, I'll have to defer to my crime analyst. Carrie, are you aware of any uptick in gang activity and how we track that?
If you want, please.
Okay, that's all.
Forgive me, I'm new at this. So mostly what we've been seeing in terms of gang activity is a lot of Denver gang members coming into Lakewood. And this was actually when I just got started about 1.5 years ago. And as of recently, we haven't seen a lot of the activity going. But what we were seeing was they would come in on the light rail, commit their crimes, and then head back out. But from the last year or so, we've been seeing they're mostly staying in the Denver area.
That's really good. We like them to stay there. That's perfect. Next to last question is, in terms of traffic stops, are you seeing any difference in the stops regarding alcohol versus marijuana impaired driving? Are you seeing an uptick in that? Or are they just crazy drivers no matter what?
Fortunately, Counselor, I don't have the answer for you,
Okay.
but I'll get it to you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know that anybody has an answer for this last question, but in terms of the types of crimes that we're seeing in Lakewood, one of the concerns that I think a lot of our citizens have is that it feels more and more like we're becoming an urban area and not a suburban area. And I'm not sure that I'm clear in their definition between those two. Are you feeling like there's enough of a crime uptick that would be a concern that you're finding, or are we still a nice, sleepy neighborhood, suburban area?
I don't think we're a sleepy suburb. I would tell you we're an urban area, and I would tell you to drive the city and you'll see some areas that this isn't the Lakewood that was here 50 years ago. And again, I mean, if you drive West Colfax between, and you'll see we have definitely become urbanized.
Thank you for keeping us safe and all that you all do. We know that it takes a lot of heart and soul, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for keeping us safe.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Chief, thank you. I appreciate you very much coming and publicly addressing this, because frankly all I'm hearing is public safety, and I like that you brought slides. Thank you. I hear so much about random shots. Are these ever being reported to you, or are people just word of mouth saying it? What do you have any idea about that?
I think a lot of times when they are reported, we respond, and we found shell casings and different things, and it's hard sometimes though too, because there could be also sound carries, and a lot of times if we get a report, we're not sure where it's coming from. But I think some of these are being reported to us, so I don't know if I did not bring any statistics or look at that where we're at right now, so I can't really answer that accurately. But my sense is we do definitely see that.
I am hearing that almost on a daily basis, actually. At one point, Wards 1 and Wards 2, or Ward 1 and 2, had a cops and council, and somehow that dropped. Did you find, or do you think that helps the relationships, or was it helpful for your time to do that? Is that something we should look at initiating again?
I think any chance we get out in the community is a good thing.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know why that stopped either. I don't know what happened with that, but yeah, anytime we can get out in the community, and I know when we have our CAT agents come to some of the ward meetings, I know they're very informative, and that's a good thing. But yeah, yes, Councilor Johnson, that would be probably a great idea to start those up again.
Yeah, I'm wondering too. Would it ever be possible, I don't know what the cost would be, to have magnetic type business cards for people to put on their refrigerator with the non-emergency number? I even sometimes have a hard time recalling it very quickly. Maybe the wards could pass those out to give to people to have, so that they could feel comfortable calling you, but easier with.
That's sure that is definitely something we can look into. I don't know.
Maybe try it. Unfortunately, we live in a society right now where people are pretty divided, and the national rhetoric comes down to this level, and frankly, it makes your job harder. Thank you for what you're doing. I know you're under the gun. I know you've been under the microscope, and I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Abel?
Thanks, Chief. I don't think there's anyone out there that doubts what protection y'all give us and how hard you work to keep us safe. Anecdotally, it seems to me that a lot of the drive-by shootings and other violent crimes are occurring near homes that I get frequent calls about, and all over Ward 1. We have a nuisance home ordinance now. Do you think that will help in any way alleviate some of the crimes like the hotel motel nuisance legislation is hoped to do?
That's a good question, Councilor. I think it'll help. We put some teeth into that, and I know we're going to be coming back to council later this year where we've added some things where if we're being called repeatedly to these homes, we can consider them a nuisance. So I think it's going to help. It's just what the final version of that nuisance ordinance looks like is will really tell that. But we did add some of that in that presentation we talked about.
Right.
So hopefully that will be something that works.
When your officers come to our Ward 1 meetings, our community becomes quite engaged, and I think it's a great help to have them there explaining to us about prevention and enforcement, and just being on the lookout for these kind of things. So we appreciate them giving up their Saturday mornings to come and discuss the situation with our neighbors. And thanks again for the job you all do.
Thank you.
Ms. Vincent?
Okay, is the Ward 2 counselor who gets to represent Colfax. I did appreciate the other example that was off of Colfax, but I noticed it was still in Ward 2. So I'm feeling a little picked on tonight. But on a serious note, I need to know the nuisance ordinance. I think if we have some teeth in it, may help support some of those, because I think some of the crimes that have been reported around Colfax are those absentee or homes that are dilapidated, and the homeless go in there. We have the thefts in there. We have multiple instances on that, so I'd really like to see some sort of relationship with that. Also, too, when you have reports of crime, if there are 5 calls coming in saying there's an attack on Colfax and Sheridan, does that get reported 5 times, or do you condense that into one call for service?
Generally, I believe that's just one call for service. Is that correct? I think, I think it's generally just it would be considered one. It would be related to that call. So it wouldn't say, we wouldn't have, I think if that were the case, like for example, I-70, that truck crash, when we probably had over 100 calls, it's only one incident. So I would have to look into that though, but I don't believe that they just say they aggregate those.
Okay, because I think sometimes it's kind of hard, just concerned, because you can have somebody calling saying, I see a suspicious person in front of a house on 10th End. And then somebody else calls and says, 4 blocks later, I see a suspicious person. And sometimes it's hard to see if it's the same suspicious person. The hotel motel ordinance, when it was enacted, how long do you think we'll need to look at that before we see if there's an impact to the crime rate?
At least a year, because that's what we said. We were going to go a year. And then after that, then we're going to start some of the probationary sort of functions where, requiring different business practices, lighting, things like that. So I would say at least a year before we see any results of that. And that was to be fair to the businesses too, because we didn't want to just pass that right away and then say, okay, you have a week to comply. It wasn't fair to them. And our CAT team's been working with them quite a bit. So, so hopefully we will see some benefits from that. I think we already have.
And then just on a personal note, because I know some people have questions, as you know, I'm going to get the name wrong, JCRS, yes. Lamar Station Plaza, that is a very active center now, a lot more of activity with folks. Is there any way that we can get information to see if that activity has decreased the reported crimes right around there?
We can look into it. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's with our crime analyst. She can look at do some work on that, and we can find out.
Okay, I'd appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Ms. Franks?
Thanks, Mayor Paul, and thanks, Chief McCaskey. Appreciate all that you guys do. I certainly do. I wanted to ask a question about the online crime stats. Number one, I think that's great that we have that there. You can certainly monitor that. But the key question I have is, does the online reporting also feed into that for the non-emergency? So if somebody goes on and reports a property crime, maybe their car was unlocked, but the merchandise or things were taken, does that show up in that LexisNexis reporting, or do we not know if that aggregates from the online reporting?
I believe it does, but I'll defer. Yes, it does. Yes.
It does. So I just wanted to, because we've been really actively encouraging the community to report that. It helps you guys understand where pockets of crime are happening. It helps you with resourcing. And so I really want to just make sure the community knows that the online reporting, if it's really more for insurance, still make sure that you do that report. It's really beneficial for our police department to accurately place the resources. And the other thing I was hoping that you could do is, you've mentioned the CAT team twice, but there's going to be folks who don't know what the CAT team is. And also make sure that maybe we talk for a couple minutes just about the navigators that are built into the 2020 budget and what you're expecting that maybe how we'll benefit from adding those navigators to the police force.
Sure. The CAT team, or Community Action Team, was formed a couple years ago, and we're expanding that in this budget cycle. We're adding another sergeant. We did have 2 mental health caseworkers from Jefferson Center, but we lost one of them, so we're in the process of working with them to hire another. And then we're also, as you mentioned, the homeless navigators. The community action team is basically our community policing team. So their primary goals are to address homelessness and mental health cases that we're seeing a significant increase in. That's why we have the Jefferson Center employees there. The homeless navigators, we're requesting 2, and hopefully the plan for them is to be a resource. So when we contact somebody who's homeless and looking for resources, our homeless navigators will know the system and know where they can send them, whether it's the Family Tree, the Action Center, whether it's Jeffco Human Services, those type of things. So they'll coordinate a response. And it's a much better use of resources than having a sworn police agent do all of those activities. And I know our city manager's really been big with the homeless work. So, Ms. Hodson, am I missing anything on the navigators?
Nice job, Chief. The only thing I would add is the Navigator program will include a really good coordination with all of the services and resources within the county. So we will be working closely with the county. Although the navigators will be employed by the city of Lakewood, each city has committed to employing their own navigators. They will work also as a team with the county so we can take advantage of resources that are countywide. That's the only thing you didn't mention. That was the only thing.
Well, I wanted to thank you because I think that's important because it's a regional issue. And when one municipality makes a legislative change, that can just push folks from one place to the other. And I think that we're taking a really good approach to working with the area, with Jeffco, and working with the others to find solutions that actually solve problems rather than just moving them around. So I really appreciate that. And that's why I wanted you to explain that.
Thank you.
Mr. Roybal.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, great job. It's fantastic to see your officers coming out and through our neighborhoods and doing some great work. One of the things that I wanted to bring out is the police night out. You guys do a fantastic job. The other thing that I wanted to talk about in our community is allowing our community to take responsibility for our own community. One of the positive things that we looked at, and I'd like your help on this if it's possible, to go ahead and do a PR campaign on Neighborhood Watch. I'd like to see more on that. If you would please send us all on council, the forms, the basic information, the background on it, and maybe we can take it to our ward meetings and pass it through there so we can help you help ourselves. So if there's any numbers that we need to call for non-emergency, emergency, or whatever you guys have, and we can put that in some kind of form and then hand it to our people, I think that would definitely help us in the community. We have a lot of brand new residents coming through our neighborhoods. And I know I started Neighborhood Watch about 8-10 years ago. Well, in our neighborhood, everybody watches out for everybody, but we have new neighbors coming in throughout the area. So that's the reason why I was asking, and if it would be possible, if we can go ahead and continue and maybe ask again about Neighborhood Watch, and we can push it.
Absolutely. Division Chief Lower, that falls under his support services division, and he's nodding over there, and he's got it taken care of. So
that would be great. Thank you.
Working on that.
Ms. Gutwein.
Thank you, Chief. First, like others up here, I just really want to thank you and all of the police force for the incredible work you do and your bravery day in and day out for our community. And I also really want to thank you for your response for Jefferson County Public Schools. And there's been a number of incidents that our police department really stepped in and helped. And I get a lot of feedback from parents in the community that they're just very thankful And I am, of course, feel that way as well. And also wanted to thank Chief Lohr, who helped us with a neighborhood issue. There was a little while we were talking to each other a couple times a week, so I'm glad that's over with, but really appreciate that. Couple of questions for you. One of the things that I hear the most about is concern about car break-ins. I know we have a regional effort, and you discussed it a little bit. Could you just, for the benefit of the community, talk a little bit more about that effort and how its success is, or how it's going?
Well, we have a motor vehicle theft task force. And so that doesn't necessarily address the car break-ins. The car break-ins are probably one of the most prevalent crimes throughout the metropolitan area. And a lot of times you see them at apartment complexes, shopping centers, areas like that, because that's where you have the most cars. We don't tend to find them in our neighborhoods generally. In the residential neighborhoods, it's more apartment complexes and areas like and shopping malls, those types of things. But backing up a little bit, and so I don't know if you want to talk about car break-ins. That, for me personally, that's just really a frustrating situation because a lot of times car break-ins can be prevented. It's one of those crimes where you don't leave your wallet on the front seat, you lock your car door, things like that. And we've tried to do some education. We've done some things in looking at Lakewood where we've sent out articles. We do, as far as like the auto thefts too, council passed an ordinance that doesn't allow for vehicles to run in the street unattended. And we have a lot of stolen vehicles, especially in the winter months when people will go out to warm them up and then the next thing you know, your car's gone. So that we have an ordinance against that, and we do a lot of enforcement. We try to do a lot of education with our auto theft task force. But our auto theft task force, we have a commander, sergeant, a detective, and other employees assigned to that, and they've been really going after a lot of sort of the bigger rings where cars are stolen and then they're either taken to chop shops and stripped and things like that. So. One kind of success story we just had, and the city manager gave some of our detectives an award last week. A foreign car company, and I won't say who, had a semi full of their test vehicles, and it was parked in a lot, and that worth millions of dollars, and it was stolen. And we recovered the entire semi with, I believe it was probably 6 or 8 vehicles that this car company estimated was again in the millions of dollars because they were prototypes, so we're doing a lot of things like that with our auto theft task force where they're taking down these big chop shops that strip cars and send them to different areas and things like that. So just the day-to-day stuff though, that's generally in-house with the police department with us. I don't know if that answers your question.
That does. Yes, thank you. And then on a similar note, you mentioned about the car break-ins and just making sure that we lock our cars. I wanted to know about burglaries, if there's other things that you recommend in terms of prevention in homes. And also I get questions about if those home security systems, do those actually help people prevent crimes at home?
Lock your doors. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Secure your home, lock your doors, cut your shrubs so they're not blocking the windows where they hide people. Turn your lights on at night, your outside lights, things like that. And we probably have a lot more prevention tips online on our website, and I'll look at that to make sure. But as far as home security systems, those are sold by private companies. We have a verified alarm policy in Lakewood, so we generally there has to be, other than just one alarm, there has to be some other sort of indication that there's a situation with those. for us to respond. Years ago, this was changed under Chief Burns when he was here because we were spending so much time responding to false alarms. So that's a personal preference. I don't know if they work or don't. I don't really.
That's fair. Sorry, I shouldn't have asked you that. You're not selling those systems. Last question is just about light rail and crime prevention on light rail. Could you tell us a little bit more about what kind of crime prevention is happening for the light rail?
Sure. RTD has their own security force, and they generally patrol the light rail and the light rail stations. We also work extra duty. We're contracted with RTD, where we have plainclothes and uniform agents that ride the trains on a daily basis. We're on those trains. We're not able to cover the entire time the trains are running, but we cover a significant portion of that. So we patrol the lots and mark vehicles, and again, we're on the trains as well in an undercover capacity. And they also have incredible security cameras and footage, so we're able to communicate with RTD, their headquarters, whenever there's a situation. They can call us, and we respond pretty effectively.
Great, thank you, and thank you so much for your time and presentation. I had a lot more questions going into the night, just because, we are hearing things about crime rates and stuff like that, and it's really helpful to have the facts in front of us, so I appreciate that. And I also want to echo, we've made a couple of policy changes over the last year that hopefully, we'll see some results from, but certainly any changes that could be made moving forward, I think that is one thing you would find all of us supporting. So thank you for everything you do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. LeBeer?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to repeat what Councilor Goodwine just said, and also what I know the mayor said earlier about just resources, frankly, just to let us know, what you need from us to be successful and, achieving and accomplishing the goals for the department. I was at a meeting a few months ago with Chief Pazan, and I was really impressed by some of the level of analysis they were doing. They had the entire city of Denver mapped out with by census block, and they were talking about how many trees were in each census block, because there was a correlation between the amount of trees and the number of crimes. And I thought that was informative from a public policy perspective, because if those are the kind of things that we could use or need to know whenever we're thinking about our development policies or all those kind of things, because I think those are obviously those could be useful in how we make public policy. So any type of those type of analyses that could be helpful, please let us know. Also, just wanted to mention, as far as public information, obviously any type of campaigns or things that we could do to help be more proactive to get citizens on board on what the goals are, what our plans are to prevent crime, please let us know. I know fireworks, for example, this 4th of July was a hot topic, and I think a lot of people want to see more public information campaigns to talk about how fireworks are illegal or that type of thing, to help reduce hopefully help reduce people doing that and reduce calls to service and that sort of thing. So any of those type of campaigns where we could be helpful in funding that, please let us know. I think council would agree that could be or would like to support you in that in any way we can. And also, I don't know if we're too small of a city, but obviously there are other resources out there and things that maybe we don't have that some cities do, like Shot Spotter or that kind of thing. So if there are any type of those equipment needs that perhaps we should be taking a look at, I'd be a huge proponent of helping you guys get those resources. And I guess the last thing, this came up just because Councilor Goodwine mentioned it, but things like home alarms, if that is something that, you were going to a lot of different alarm homes because of home alarms, and there's not a revenue stream. I know other cities have done things like, had a license or requirements for those type of things, just to sort of help, help the police department have the resources necessary to look at those type of things. So just wanted to reiterate what's already been said, but just know I'm a huge supporter, and I know I sat down with you last year and let you know that I'd be happy to support the department any way I can. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great. And Chief, one other area we didn't really cover, and it is important, I think, because we've also seen increased issues with this, and it's traffic speeding. And I know our Lakewood Advisory Commission is looking at kind of educational things. I just saw a presentation when they were trying to map out at Denver Regional Council of Government 20 years ago. One of their stated goals was to see a reduction in traffic fatalities, and of all the metrics they were putting together, that's one that they just is still not going down. And I know in Denver they're looking at lowering the speeds on residential streets, but at the same time, people just aren't even following the speed limit. I don't know what that does. And you have important things to do, right? I mean, or, there's crime out there, so I don't know how active we can be with our traffic teams, but I know you see it. And do you have any insight into that, or what we do? I know, people know not to speed in Morrison, but we're certainly not, Morrison, right? We have a lot of other things going on.
We are seeing an increase in our traffic fatalities, and again, I think that's throughout the metro area. We're not alone in that. There are more people. There's more aggressive driving. There's a lot more distracted driving, cell phones, those kind of things, and then there's probably the marijuana and alcohol influence that we're seeing as well. So we do have 2 traffic teams. They're very busy. They're heavy in the enforcement. I think. From my perspective, the more enforcement, the better your traffic pattern. The better the traffic flows, I guess is a way to say that. But we are seeing that, and I was just in a meeting with the State Patrol the other day, and they're talking to one of their majors in the metro area, and they're seeing the exact same thing that we are. It's a lot of distracted driving. And I know the state legislature's looked at some different things, hands-free, that type of thing. But there's more cars on the road, and I wish I had a better answer, but we are seeing significant increases in our injuries and fatalities. And we've had a lot with motorcycles as well, too, and I think that just when there's more cars on the road, motorcycles aren't as visible, and we've had some serious accidents there as well.
Well, I think you also see an uptick in regular neighborhoods, and maybe that's correlated to driving apps or, these things that help people get through neighborhoods when there's traffic. But, where kids used to go run and play, now cars are screaming down the roads, at 30, 40 miles an hour. And that's new for a lot of neighborhoods. And, I know we certainly just don't have the bandwidth to be out there at every instance or put a speed bump in every neighborhood where there's an issue. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I failed to just bring this up. Could you please talk a little bit about the crotch rockets on 6th Avenue? It seems like they're on the weekends. They've become an issue as far as the noise. I know that's not easy, but just talk about how you deal with it and what you're seeing there yourself.
Sure, Councilor Johnson. Well, I have not heard the complaints this past year that I have in the past about those. So I know they're out there. And Chief Rickles,
Counselor, I'll just say this past summer, we did not receive complaints as we did in the summer of 2018, where we actually had 4 to 6 traffic agents working overtime shifts on the weekends to address those issues. We did not see that this summer. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, just it's not being reported to us. And as you know, when we did do this operation in 2018, I'd say of the 3 or 4 motorcycles that did fly by at a high rate of speed, maybe 1 stopped. So they're difficult to pull over because many times they decide they just want to flee into Denver. So And if I may add about the traffic fatalities, and I'm sorry to jump back, much like the homicides this past year in Lakewood, the traffic fatalities is also kind of an anomaly. When you look at the I-70 traffic accident alone, claimed 4 lives. A fleeing vehicle at Alameda and Kipling that's driving with no headlights in excess of 100 miles an hour and kills 2 people. And unfortunately, the other morning here on 6th Avenue at Sheridan, where we had a young lady decide to walk into traffic on 6th Avenue at rush hour and gets killed. Those things are tough to prevent, and I think, unfortunately, we've had that high rate this year. And hopefully, we won't see it again next.
And one thing we didn't mention, we did 2 operations with Jefferson County, State Patrol, all the municipalities that have I-70. And we I think we wrote almost 500 tickets in 2 operations. And we did the entire county. The sheriff deputized all of us. And we did a lot of enforcement. And a lot of it was on our Twitter, our Twitter page. But we had I think the fastest speed we got was 120 miles an hour coming down I-70. But we wrote almost 500 tickets combined with Arvada, Wheat Ridge, Golden, Lakewood, Jefferson County, State Patrol, and Morrison joined us for a portion of that as well. So, and we're going to continue to do those.
When you write the tickets, does it help stop it, or what happens to them? Do they go back and do the same thing? I mean, how does that work?
That's a good question. We hope it stops them. We hope it hurts their wallets enough that they'll think twice before driving like that. But it's a good reminder that we're out there, and it slows. And whether we write somebody a ticket or not, other people see us out there, and hopefully that changes their driving patterns a little bit. It won't change it forever, but hopefully it helps a little bit.
Thank you.
So you're deputized.
Well, actually, the sheriff didn't deputize me. He didn't want to do that. So, but.
Right. Well, thank you all very much, and I know this was really important for the community to have this opportunity to hear from all of you, and we certainly appreciate what you do day in and day out, and we're very proud of the Lakewood Police Department. So,
well, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the first time in my career I think that we've ever talked about crime statistics in front of City Council. So. I apologize if we're missing some things or didn't cover some things. This is kind of a unique presentation. I would just close by saying we have a lot of dedicated men and women at the Lakewood Police Department that really care about this community and want to serve this community. And we're not perfect, and we do have crime in Lakewood. I wish we didn't, but we're almost 160,000 people. We're in a big metropolitan area, and so we do have some issues. And I can just tell you, the dedicated men and women, we try to address those. So we're doing the best we can. And again, we're not perfect, but we're out there working hard for you. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hodson, did you?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to summarize a few things that we'll follow up on. One is our communication staff will work with the police staff to start promoting the Neighborhood Watch program. We will also promote the non-emergency contact information and make that more prominent so people know how to contact the police in a non-emergency way. We're also going to somehow really reinforce the message that people need to report crimes to the police department. So we'll make sure that that's also a more prominent message. I think it's also important that we again reinforce some prevention tips, as Councilor Gutwein talked about, what people can do themselves to help prevent crime on their own property. And finally, we'll continue to promote safety messages as it relates to upcoming events, et cetera, like the fireworks during the 4th of July season. So we will work with the police department and make sure that we are sending this message along, all these messages. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now have an opportunity for public input, which is different than public comment. Public input is geared towards the presentation that you just saw and any questions that the community might have. It's a 3-minute time limit. Nobody has signed up, but I want to just get this out because we have another opportunity when folks have signed up. But 3 minutes. This little box here has a timer on it. At 2.5, it'll go yellow. When your time's up, it'll be red. So, Mr. Pasternak, crime? Come on down. On this one, right? Or on, okay, great. Great, thank you. Good evening.
Qualified and
Welcome.
hi guys, I haven't met yet. I'm Scott Pasternak. I own the Pasternak's Art Hub and Pasternak's Pawn Shops. So I am uniquely qualified to talk on this, being on West Colfax. When I had the pawn shop, we were an undesirable business. And I didn't see many city council people come in, the police officers, the same thing. In Aurora, where I have my other shop, we have a par where the officers actually come in and they walk the Colfax, and they meet all the business owners, and we get to know them. We sit down, have coffee, we kibitz, we talk and have fun, and I get to know the officers. It's something that is missing in Lakewood because it's really been a hard thing to get the business owners, especially on Colfax, to get to know everybody with being in, because Colfax is not, like you said, it's not the most desirable place to be. But it's a fun street, it is. I think we need to make more of an effort to get the business owners, whether it's the pawn shops, whether it's the motel owners, whether it's the little Mexican restaurants, all the people should have get to know each other. Because even now that I've turned it into the art hub and got out of the pawn shop business out here, it's showed me so many. I see a lot of you people at the hub. You guys come in, and I love it, and I get to know you, and I get to be. And I'll say I have several friends of you guys up here up here, and it's a great thing to see that, because now I'm more of a desirable business versus a pawn shop. But I think all the businesses along Colfax should have even whether it's just not even one-on-one, but at least to get to know several of the officers. I know with ATF, the ATF sends out agents to all the pawn shops, and I know several of them, and we work closely with them. Same thing, we were in Denver. We got really close, and it's hard, I know, because Aurora's changing too. We used to have the pawn details. There's a police part of each police has a pawn detail. We used to be able to, they would come in and pick up the tickets once a week, and we would get to know each other. Nowadays, it's all sent through the computers, so we lose that connection. And that's really a hard thing, is we need to build back up that connection between the business owners and the police and the city council, everybody. So,
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you again. And we will move on to our next presentation. I believe that's going to be Mr. Hutchison. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. And I'm not going to make 3 minutes.
Oh.
But I also won't be 30, so I'll try to keep this fairly brief because there's not a lot of new information here, but I want to spend just a few minutes to set some context for those who maybe aren't up to speed on where you all have been, because you spent a lot of time on this topic. And it's a little different from what you've just heard, but it still relates to public safety, safety of property, and safety of people as they deal with flooding. This is an informational update. There's no city council action that I'm asking for this evening, but I do want to bring you up to date on the North Dry Gulch project. And I'll talk a little bit about where we are, what we've done in response to your direction. You may remember that last time you discussed this topic, the main question really was, what form would the improvements take? Would there be more open channel? Would there be all pipes underground? Would there be some combination? And that's what I want to refresh people's memory about. But some background may be helpful first so that there's a little bit of a broader picture. The North Dry Gulch floodplain really is a significant area in North Lakewood. It's generally within about a block of Colfax from Dover to Newland Street. It starts near the Whitlock Recreation Center on the north side of Colfax at Dover, goes generally east, eventually crosses Colfax, and gets to the existing stormwater detention basin at Newland Street. That basin is behind the fire station that's at 14th and Lamar. There's some more floodplain on downstream, but the piece we're talking about tonight is really Dover to Newland. And the floodplain is a statistically created thing. It's an area, it's a space on the map, it's a geography that is the area that would flood in a storm that has a 1% probability of occurring or being exceeded in any particular year. That then, of course, has effects on properties. It has effects on individual properties because of flooding. It has effects also on the ability to reinvest in properties. There are restrictions on what can be done within a floodplain because we don't want to allow things to happen that make the risk of damage even greater or divert flooding to other properties that have less today than they might if certain changes were made to some properties. This portion of the North Dry Gulch floodplain affects a lot of properties, about 150 different properties, about 130 buildings, about 36 or so of those are residential buildings, and 23 street crossings get flooded within this floodplain as well. And it's really wide in some areas. Some floodplains are fairly narrow. This is a wide one because the facilities are really undersized in some areas. Some places it's 300 feet wide. So that can be contracted quite a bit with the improvements that you all are pursuing. It's a long-standing issue, as many of you know. Anyone who has property in that area knows that. They've probably experienced or seen one of their neighbors experience the flooding that's occurred. And it's also a current problem. This summer, we had properties, including Mr. Pasternak's, that suffered from some of the flooding that occurred just this year. And those weren't 100-year storms, so it doesn't take a 100-year storm for these areas to flood. There are other areas that will flood in storms, but this is a good measure of how much flooding can occur. As I mentioned, the City Council has spent a fair amount of time looking at this question. The most recent discussion was lengthy and covered several areas to look pretty comprehensively at this question of open channel or piped and culverts as a way to deal with the flooding and to contract that floodplain and control the water. The council looked at things like, well, what's the most effective way to do it, and what are the comparisons in effectiveness? What are the property impacts with different approaches? What would the costs be? What kind of maintenance would it take in the long term? There was some discussion about green space and paths and habitat opportunities and, of course, the existing community plans. And none of those things, it didn't all fall one way or the other, which is one of the reasons that the City Council, I think, gave us the charge to go back and talk to those property owners who would be most directly affected by construction of the improvements, regardless of what approach was used. 36 property owners were contacted again. Those are the 37 who have property that would be directly affected by the construction. 33 said, yeah, let's talk. We'll keep working on the others. And all of the ones we talked to, 100% said, yes, we've got to do something to this. Not a big surprise there. But they also all, 100%, supported using pipes and culverts as the solution in that reach that I mentioned. I should probably mention a couple of things that are a little bit different. There's an existing open channel from Wadsworth to Teller Street. It's between Walmart and Colfax. That's not proposed to be changed. It will remain. It already contains the 100-year flood volumes, so it's controlled through that area. So the areas we're talking about for adding pipes and culverts are from Wadsworth upstream to Dover, up towards the Whitlock Recreation Center. And then from the downstream end of that open channel, which is Teller Street, on down to Newland Street, both ends of that. Secondly, I should mention that one of the main distinctions here is what it's going to look like out there after the fact. With open channels, you can imagine that same channel in front of Walmart being extended. It takes a lot of space. With the culverts and pipes, the surface can be restored almost to the kind of condition it is today. There will be more storm inlets to get water into the system, that sort of thing. But generally, the land will be able to be used for other purposes. Someday it'll have to be dug up to replace the pipes, but that's decades away. So there is the ability to reuse that land for other things, whether it's the existing uses or perhaps a property owner will want to change those uses over time. Even with that solution, though, this will be a very disruptive project. This is going to be a very large construction project, probably the largest public investment in infrastructure the city's ever taken on. The physical features that we're talking about are pipes that are as big as 5 or 6 feet in diameter on the upstream end, the smaller end up near the Whitlock Recreation Center. On the downstream end near Newland, these things may be 12 or 15 feet wide. So it's going to be a very big hole in the ground. It's going to be moving utilities out of the way so that those things can be put in place. Material has to be brought in and taken out, and so it's going to be a very disruptive project. However, when it's over with the pipes underground, generally people won't notice except that the flooding will be reduced, which will be a good thing. Let me turn to financing just for a minute. The current estimate is about $35 to $40 million for all of this project from upstream of Newland Street. And I should explain that includes more than just that narrow corridor that I described, the floodplain itself. We have to get all the water into the system also. So there are several ancillary or secondary systems, not small, but secondary, that are used to manage the water to get it into the big system. Three good examples include starting at the Whitlock Recreation Center, going north on Dover, and then west on 20th to about Garland Street. These are approximate at this point. We're kind of in the conceptual stage. A second one will start near the Whitlock Center, go west on Colfax, including some work up by Garrison. And then the third one's farther east, and it will probably start at about 14th and Vance and go downstream and connect into the larger system down near Pierce Street. Those are not small storm sewer projects for the community, but they're necessary to make this larger project actually complete and effective. So that's included, of course, in the cost estimate. I'm standing here today telling you 35 to 40 million, knowing that someday somebody's going to say, oh, it costs more than that. Frankly, we're working from pretty conceptual information. We also know that construction costs are escalating faster than the consumer price index is, and we don't know how long that'll go on. And this is a multi-year, very large project. We'll learn a lot about utilities that have to be moved, those sorts of things. So it won't surprise me if the number's larger. But today, in 2019 dollars, that's a reasonable estimate of what this project's going to cost. We're proceeding with the design of all those features, and I guess one other thing that I want to talk about, just to I'm not really here to try to scare anybody, but I want people to understand the scale of this project. You may remember the Wadsworth widening project that happened over recent years from north of 6th Avenue near Highland Drive on up to about 14th Avenue. That construction was about 8/10 of a mile long. Now, it was a different kind of project. It was a road widening. But the amount of pipe that'll have to be put in the ground for this project is about 1.25 miles. So 8/10 of a mile was the Wadsworth project. 1.25 miles is this project. And that's not counting the open channel at Walmart. So this is a very large endeavor. Lots of great benefits, but it's a large endeavor. Today, we have the good fortune of having some money in the bank. There's about $7.6 million in the bank already earmarked for this project. And that's joint money contributed by the city's stormwater management utility and the Mile High Flood District, which may be a new term to some who are used to hearing the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District as the term. Which this is the same group doing the same kinds of things with the same money, but they've rebranded and are now known as the Mile High Flood District. So the Mile High Flood District and the city's stormwater management utility have been putting money in the bank essentially for this purpose. That funding will get us through the design process. It'll probably get utility design work done, and perhaps the utilities all relocated, or a good portion of them. There is some land acquisition that's necessary. That should be able to be done with those funds as well. But that leaves another $30 million plus or minus to get the construction completed. And as you all have pointed out, we don't want to wait the number of years it would take to do that necessarily on a cash basis. So our plan is to come back and talk to you about possible financing options at the time that the current money is almost used up, not quite, because we don't want to put a gap in the process. But there are some reasons to postpone the actual financing discussion until later. One of those is that we've got money in the bank and we don't need to accrue interest costs during this interim period until we spend down some of that existing money. The second is that some of the borrowing techniques actually have restrictions and require that the money be spent in a relatively short amount of time. So we don't want to put at risk those borrowings or penalties by borrowing the money too soon and not being able to get it spent within those requirements. A third one is the financial market will be a little bit different at that point, so going into much detail right now wouldn't be really helpful. But there are multiple financing tools that could be used. The stormwater utility could sell revenue bonds, and those would be paid off by the stormwater utility. just a bank or some other financial institution might loan the money, or a consortium might. So there are a variety of techniques that we'll look at and come back to you with at the appropriate time. I guess the other thing I should mention about the financing is that the Mile High Flood District will not commit its money to debt service. We may be able to use it, but they won't commit it. So whatever debt service has to be guaranteed, it'll have to be guaranteed by the stormwater utility, and that may factor into the things as well. We're also learning a little bit more about the stormwater utility. You may remember that a year ago you authorized purchase of a closed-circuit television van, and we're beginning that process of inventorying the condition of the entire stormwater system. We've maintained structures like inlets and manholes, but the pipes in between we haven't been able to really do a great job on understanding. We're doing that more. That will help us understand how much money we need for maintenance, and that should probably be at least some consideration in figuring out how best to finance the construction of this project. That concludes my comments. Happy to listen to public comment and then respond to any questions. Thank you.
Great. So Jay, just before you go, because I think maybe some of the public comment may be part of this, the goal is, especially on this, the affected areas, is to go underground,
yes,
which would eliminate takings.
It would.
But there would potentially have to be some purchases of some properties, and you've been able to reach out to all but 3 property owners.
Yes, and you're right. It'll reduce the amount of land acquisition considerably. There will be fewer owners that there's any acquisition. Some of those acquisitions will become permanent easements so that we can go underground and they can still use the surface, as opposed to fee purchase of a corridor for the open channel, all of those kinds of changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll go to public input then, and then we can come back and there'll be questions for council or for Mr. Hutchison. Again, 3 minutes, and this is your opportunity to ask any questions like we have up here. And Barbara, you're up first. Okay. And we did have a good meeting for some of the arts folks. We had a good meeting with the Arts Collective last week as well to talk about this situation going forward. You're fine. I'm sorry. It's okay. You were well represented. Forgive me. Natalie? Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you for coming, Pat. And then I have Jeff, and then Scott. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Pat Fear with Brett's Interiors, and I just wanted to thank the entire council and the people that worked on this project for listening to us and agreeing to go underground. It really relieves us and, you know, helps our business out a huge amount, and we just want to thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, come on down. And Scott, and then I have Judy and Rob, and Mr. Terry, I see you out there, and then Forrest.
I just wanted to say thanks for looking at the underground situation. I have a property at 6700 West Colfax with Gerber Collisions as one of my tenants, and they have been, since they purchased the business from me, aggressively wanting me to invest in that property, and I just urge the council to move that along before I possibly lose a tenant. It's as you know, I sat and listened to the crime and the homeless and the West Colfax dilemmas, and strongly believe that nice looking upkept properties will help deter some of that problems that are there, and we've actively been waiting to invest in that piece of property because I know it doesn't look that great. So I just want to say thanks for moving it along, and anything you can help us to do to get the construction on its way, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
I just wanted to say thank you also for listening to all the business owners and taking a look at both sides. And I understand both ways we're going to be a benefit for Lakewood. I'm really excited that it is an underground piping. It's going to be great for the property owners that have their the property on Colfax. And I'd like to personally invite all of you to the next First Friday to come down and come see the whole art community, but especially come into the Pasternak's Art Hub. We have 4 really great galleries in there, and they would love to see you guys, all of you guys. So come on down and see us, and I'm sure I'll probably see a lot of you guys at the Riot, which is a couple
This week? Judy, you're going to send Rob down? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. You guys are probably getting sick of seeing me, and maybe that's the point. Can we just vote on this thing underground and get this thing going? I want to thank a few city council members coming to my store, and it's different when you guys are in my store and we're looking at the employees, and we're looking at how busy our store is, and we're looking at Wendy's, the brand new Wendy's that I'm right next to, and it's different than looking at a map that somebody drew out. It's and I'd invite you to my store, sir. I forgot your name. Come to my store, please. But if we could just get this thing done, we're kind of stuck because we can't do anything to our buildings because we don't know where this is going. So I think once it gets voted, we can put more money into the buildings, and that whole area will boom. I think it'll be awesome. So, thank you.
Mr. Terry? And then Forrest? Good evening.
Thank you all for getting this, at least this far of saying underground. But really what I came down here for is to hear, yes, it is going underground. And how long is it really going to take us to get that far? I've had some problems in my family with health, and it's quite a jolt to have that, plus not knowing where I'm going to be on income on property. So as soon as you could say yes, I'd be happy. So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Forrest? Good evening.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. I'd also like to thank everyone for actually talking to the property owners and doing what makes sense. And is there actual plans coming out? And is there any idea as far as starting downstream or starting upstream?
We'll get those answered as best we can, yeah.
That's all I got. Thanks, all.
Great, thanks. Mr. Mueller?
You're not going to believe this. I actually went over. I've been doing some snooping about the ditch. And I'll tell you what, Vince Castile is a gem. He is so involved, and he's so caring about the people that are along that ditch. He is a champion for this city. Anybody that's had to deal with him, loves him. So keep him around. He's a good one. Okay? One other thing about the bicycle. I'll show you the video.
All right, anybody else? Okay. Mr. Hutchison, we had a couple of questions, and one had to do with the plan where to start and as far as when you'll start to develop design work.
The design work will continue. We've got a conceptual design at this point, as I said earlier, but we've got a long ways to go from there to actual construction documents that can be bid and utilities moved and that sort of thing. So that'll take some time. Construction will start on the downstream end. If we start on the upstream end, it tends to cause problems below because it changes the pattern that gets the water there. Because that stormwater detention basin exists at Newland, that can be the downstream end because it will then attenuate the flows as it goes further south and east. So the first, it's possible this construction will be phased. And there are two obvious phases. One is from Newland upstream to Teller, so from the Walmart channel down to the open detention basin. And then the other would be from Wadsworth, the upstream end of the Walmart channel, on to Dover, where the recreation center is. Frankly, we haven't tried to make a decision yet on whether that's 2 projects or 4 projects or 1 construction project. We'll have to look at what all the impacts are, what the alternatives are, how fast we can get things out the door, whether contractor capacity is adequate for that kind of thing, whether it makes sense to have 2 different contractors or 1, a lot of those kinds of questions. So, but the first project will include the piece on the downstream end so that it actually functions appropriately. I think the second question had to do with whether any plans were coming out or available. All we have at this point are the kinds of things that all of those owners have already seen. We will dive in now to the actual preparation of construction documents that will be bid for the construction of the improvements and the utility relocations, and it'll take quite a while to do that. But during that process, we'll have interaction with property owners that are affected. We'll need to talk with owners about how can we best manage the construction near their site so they still can operate. Do they have a secondary access? Do they not have a secondary access? If they don't, how do we phase things or provide a temporary secondary access? So there will be a lot of interim kinds of discussions before we actually have completed documents to share really with anyone, because they just won't completely exist until that time.
Okay. So it's fair to say that you're going forward with plans that will be underground.
More than fair, it's absolutely accurate. The project will be underground from Dover to Wadsworth and Teller to Newland, plus the other little ancillary secondary pieces that I mentioned.
So building off of that, then, Flood Control District did some finance mechanisms last election. The voters basically debruced them and have created probably another 20 million, I think, in their construction, maybe 20 million in maintenance. Now that's shared through 7 counties. Will that help with any extra dollars that could be available for our project?
We will try to make it help. The district has an obligation to return to each county, and that includes the municipalities within that county, the tax, a proportional amount of the tax revenue that they receive from that county area. That's over a period of time. It's not every single year they hit that mark exactly, because these projects take a long time. Some are big, there's a variety of reasons that it can't be done on an annual basis. But they do that. So within Jefferson County, all the cities plus the county will receive back its proportional share of those revenues, including the additional revenues that the voters allowed the district to keep. We will certainly be lobbying for as much of that as we can get. There are other communities that are interested in it as well, so we don't really know how that'll turn out.
Okay. And then when you look at, these types of projects, we're talking about this kind of 35 to 40 million, but if we're going to be looking at doing a conversation about funding that could be bond driven or something along those lines, would you want to talk about that in larger scale, or trying to capture more of the flood issues that we have throughout the whole city?
I think that should be part of the conversation, and I think we'll have that opportunity. We'll know a lot more about the existing system and its problem areas by then through this closed circuit TV effort that we've got underway now. So we'll have a better understanding of how much of the stormwater utilities revenue has to be utilized for that kind of work. And I didn't really make it clear, but all of this work for stormwater is stormwater utility money. There's not general fund money. There's not capital improvement fund money that's going into the stormwater facilities. But there are a number of projects. There's some under construction now, one recently completed, but there are a number of others that if we can stretch if the revenue stream can support larger debt, it would seem logical to look at taking on a bigger chunk. Yeah.
Great. It's good to hear. And I would just one last comment, and that's for the folks who do own businesses. You're probably aware, but if not, we did change our ordinance related to some of our FEMA regulations, which will actually allow you to invest more dollars into your property if you're in the floodplain. So that changed the base level of how much investment you can put in. So if you're anxious to do some investment already and it won't be affected long run, we can get you that information. But council passed that a couple weeks ago. Mr. Abel?
North Dry Gulch has been a problem for us for years. When I was a Rocky Mountain news reporter and it was a slow news day, North Dry Gulch was always there to provide some copy. On the other hand, 4 years ago, we were looking at an open ditch all the way, and a number of property owners were concerned about that and concerned about how they would be able to use their properties to the full extent. And I think council wisely asked for direction from the property owners themselves. I think you've done it. Your team has done a great job. I know it was a long, hard, involved effort, but you talked to nearly everyone out there and came to a great conclusion. I just hope that we can get this thing underway so that the problems are remedied sooner than later. But I do recall being in Kmart with the water flowing across from Colfax into the doors of the shop of the Kmart. We're a long way past that now already, and soon we hope we'll have that flood problem taken care of. Thank you.
Ms. Vincent.
Yes, this is more of a comment. What a Ward 2 kind of night. Crime and bad pipes. We've got it all, don't we? I'm telling you. But what I want to offer to folks out there is I know there's been some misinformation or a lot of questions and a lot of angst about a lot of this stuff. So I'd just like to offer for Jacob and myself, if you have any questions, please reach out to us, and we'd be glad to answer those questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. This is one of the best nights for me as a counselor. 4 years ago, this was brought to my attention. And at that point, I realized that the above ground remediation was what we were looking at. I started talking with businesses at that point, and I've been talking with them ever since. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am, Jay, that the city reached out in May and June and talked to the businesses. You heard what I've been hearing for years. People wanted to be heard, and they wanted it underground. We heard earlier with the crime regarding the businesses on Colfax and economic development. This will go a long way to help with that. I am absolutely thrilled. I have been saying it was a moral imperative, and I absolutely believe that we got to take care of our businesses on Colfax. Thank you, thank you. It is a win for all of you people. This is awesome. Thank you.
Ms. Franks?
Thanks, Mayor Paul. Mr. Hutchinson, I wanted to just kind of make sure that as you come back to us kind of with how maybe the financing needs to work on this, I was at a community meeting on a different gulch that more impacts residents, and there's some serious bank erosion. And I know it was talked about during that meeting that they're going to be moving forward to solidify those plans a little bit more. But there was also the discussion about, well, monies could be refocused in other areas, and so that may take that timeline longer. So I'd like to understand kind of the options we have, because we certainly want to take care of our businesses. They're the backbone of making sure that we produce good revenue, but we also have other needs. So if you can kind of make sure we know where some of that other gulch work stands, how it might be either delayed or how we may need to look at a bigger financing plan in order to make sure that some of those needs get addressed simultaneously or within a reasonable period. So no ask for tonight, but if you could kind of let us know at that point how other projects might be impacted, that would be great.
Thank you. Mr. LeBear?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jay. Just wanted to say, we appreciate all the work you and your team have done. This is a very important project for the city, but also certainly for our ward and obviously the businesses that live on the or that reside on Colfax and up and down the corridor. I also live right on one of the gulches that connects to this, and every time it rains, we get to see the water flowing over the street. So obviously, for homeowners in the neighborhoods too, I think they're obviously excited to see all the improvements that are happening in Two Creeks and in the surrounding neighborhoods. So we appreciate that. Also, just want to thank all the neighbors and residents who have had the opportunity to sit down with and talk to about the projects. I appreciate all of your input and the maps that you've shown me and your businesses. I had the opportunity to go see and check out your parking lots and all that stuff where some of this project is going to impact. So thank you for your involvement and input. So thanks.
Cool. Well, looks like that's all. So it's a good night. Thank you very much. Nice work, Mr. Hutchison and your team. Mr. Doors here too. All right. So we'll just go to reports, and so much going on in the city, but I just want to really give a shout out to Miss Hodson and your team for another incredible cider days. It was packed and a lot of great fun, and I think people really enjoyed it, and it seemed to me like probably the biggest attendance we've had to have been. So nicely done, and appreciate that. And then you heard mention of Riot Fest. It'll be this Saturday, I think from 6 to 8. And it's going to be at Prestige Porsche, and that will be the Arts District's annual fundraiser. There's probably tickets still available, but I think they're going to clear the showroom, so there should be plenty of room for people to come and enjoy our wonderful art scene. Mr. Abel?
I want to second the comments on the cider days, and it was a real pleasure to hear all of our volunteers who were so happy that there were so many people there. And, the success of Saturdays belongs in large measure to those folks that show up to help us with all of our activities like Saturdays. We couldn't do it without them.
Mr. Roybal? Ms. Gutwein?
Thank you to everyone who came to our Ward 5 meeting this past weekend, including both of our candidates for mayor. Thank you for making that happen. And we had a lively discussion, and hopefully people got their questions answered, but just really appreciate everybody's participation in this process.
Mr. Skilling, nothing. Mr. LeBear?
I want to third the Cider Days comments. It was a great time. Haley and I enjoyed going out there and having some fun and hanging out with some neighbors. So thanks for everyone who made that possible. Also, just want to mention our ward meeting is canceled for this Wednesday because our venue is having some annual maintenance done. So we had to reschedule for our November meeting on somewhat of short notice. I apologize for that, but just want to mention that. Thanks.
Thanks. Ms. Harrison?
No report.
Thanks. Ms. Johnson? Ms. Rita? Ms. Vincent?
I expect to see everyone at the Riot Fest, and despite rumors, they are not giving an Audi away as a door prize. I just thought I'd mention that.
That's a Porsche. Michelle, anything? Mr. Graham, Ms. Hodson? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Agent Hunt, thank you, sir. You had an eventful night back there. We appreciate you. We'll adjourn at 8:53.